John Wall, very upset that AEA is supposedly so successful with a Republican supermajority in the legislature and, of course, Republican domination of the judicial and executive branches.
Are you on? Which side are you on?
Adam, the Alabama Education Association. We love teachers here. We love workers, and we love unions. The Alabama Education Association is an affiliate of the National Education Association, which is ostensibly the largest union in the country, with 3 million members. And in some states, they do explicitly act like a union, and they call themselves a union. But in Alabama, they do not. They don't have collective bargaining rights here in Alabama. They don't want collective bargaining rights here in Alabama. They do not bill themselves as a union. They bill themselves as a professional association. And they, don't do a whole lot of organizing, but they do a lot of lobbying. And, so talk to us about the AEA's strategy over the last few years and what's been happening over the last couple of weeks.
Sure, yeah. There's been some news with education and the Republican Party, and AEA has come up quite a bit. Before I get into that, I want to first just kind of preface it by some comments that Governor Kay Ivey made. Right. Kay Ivey made some news a couple weeks ago. She went on Capitol Journal, which is, the Alabama public television show that the politicians go on every week. And she talked about school choice, saying, quote, "It's very important for our parents to have choices of where to send their children for school, whether it's public, private, homeschooled, or whatever. The goal is to get our children a quality education. We are working now already on an ESA bill, an education savings account bill, to present to the legislature in the next session, and I'm very optimistic that it will pass." So that's what the governor said. Interestingly enough, last I checked, parents already have those choices, and public, private, homeschool, or whatever already exists, and you can do those things.
Right.
What, of course, Governor Ivey and her allies are advocating for is state funding for privatized education. And so the education savings account bill is just another word for vouchers, more or less. And as she said, she's very optimistic about it coming up for passage and her getting to sign that. And so that's interesting because the last few years, school choice and the right-wing attacks on public education have not really been super successful in the Alabama legislature. There's been some, incremental building of school choice is what Kay Ivey called it. And I think that's fair to say. And, the last few years, you've seen growth in the budget, right? So the budgets have been growing. There's not been a wholesale expansion of vouchers or charter schools. And so it's been interesting to see it play out where there's rhetoric within the Republican Party around these issues and also around culture war issues that they've integrated into education issues. For example, don't say gay bills or critical race theory and some of the controversies around that. So we've seen a lot of rhetoric coming from the Republican Party. But, in terms of what's actually been passing out of Montgomery in the last few years, education hasn't been as attacked as you might would imagine, at least successfully. It looks like that could change very soon. There's a gentleman named John Wall, real interesting fella from North Alabama, who is the chair of the Republican Party in Alabama. And he's made some news recently. He has been very upset that the AEA has been in bed with so many Republicans. So as I mentioned, the last few years, hasn't been a ton of school choice expansion or austerity budgets or some of the other things that we typically see. And this spring or summer, AEA, was very was bragging about their legislative session, felt they were very successful in their goals, in their lobbying goals. And by their metrics, I think arguably they were. And so, there was, a modest pay raise, the budgets grew, and there was no major school choice legislation passed. And that really upset John Wall, the chair of the Republican Party. He's very upset that, AEA is supposedly so successful with a Republican supermajority in the legislature, and of course, Republican domination of the judicial and executive branches as well. And, one thing he wants to target are the donations made by AEA or its PAC, A-Vote. They want to target those donations that are being made to Republican candidates. Because, a key strategy of AEA in the last few years has been to donate large sums of money to Republican candidates. And, essentially they've been trying to build this coalition of Democrats who are in the super minority and just enough Republicans, predominantly from rural areas where public schools are, one of the largest employers in the county, and school choice is really very appealing. So this coalition of, primarily Republicans from rural areas alongside the Democrats, who make up just enough to kill these bad bills for public schools.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And so that's been a big strategy. And John Wall in the Republican Party has issued calls to ban contributions from AEA for Republican candidates for school board and superintendent. And he's kind of looking into the legislature as well. And that's going to be interesting because many of the Republican legislators who are very influential in the party, in the legislature, they've gotten $25,000 checks from AEA. And now that doesn't necessarily change some of their rhetoric. And some of these very same people are some of the same folks that are voting for divisive concepts bills, and anti-LGBT bills and things of that nature. But yeah, there's a contradiction there. We'll see which factions within the Republican Party win out. In the interview with Patrick Darrington, John Wall talked to Patrick Darrington with the Alabama Political Reporter. He called AEA, quote, a liberal education union, which I find hilarious because it is not a union. As you said, Jacob, they are very adamant that they don't want to be called a union, don't want to operate like a union. They do not associate themselves with the labor movement. And so they are also not liberal. The folks in leadership are quite conservative. I know them personally. They are conservative politically and in other ways. And so, yeah, it's not a liberal outfit. They have given more money to Republicans than Democrats.
You're saying that they're not liberal because they're Marxist, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. That must be what it is. They must be those crazy radicals. Yeah, so it's just wild that the vision that John Wall has of this like left-wing militant union really only exists in their imagination. What it actually is very Republican friendly, conservative professional organization that has much more in common with like Alpha Insurance than they do the Chicago Teachers Union. If we're being honest, if we actually take an honest assessment of where they stand and where things actually play out in Alabama. So yeah, I definitely recommend this article with APR and Patrick Darrington. The interview John Wall gave was very interesting. He, of course, points out NEA as being another like boogeyman. Apparently, NEA is at conflict with parents. Now, he can't exactly explain how, but he's bound and determined to let you know that NEA is at war with parents and parental rights. Again, rights to what? It's not entirely clear, but it's interesting. And so, yeah, he escalated by saying that they don't want to they don't want to allow Republican candidates for school board or superintendent accept AEA money. And, that's a whole new level, for the party to come out and say, you cannot run as a candidate for these positions if you take money from this entity. That's a big deal. That's an escalation. So we'll see. We'll see, how it plays out. It's interesting how it plays out with AEA because, right, they're trying to do this delicate dance of balancing the needs of their members and the diversity of their members and this coalition they're assembling that involves Republicans and, trying to cater towards Republicans. So, we'll see how it plays out. But long story short, you go to bed with snakes and you're going to get bit. And so AEA is giving a lot of money to Republicans, and here the Republicans are out here bashing them and making them out to be left wing, which is, believe me, I know personally that freaks them out. They don't want to be left wing. They're far from it. They're very far from that. They want to be accepted as part of the conservative establishment. And so, but, they just have that love-hate relationship going on, I guess, and we'll see how it shakes out. But it looks like the bigger news is for teachers and students and people who depend upon the public education system. It is definitely in the crosshairs for the legislative session ahead.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to be on the side of AEA to a certain extent as they fight against, the privatization of public schools. But
sure,
we are very, very critical of the way that they're going about that fight. And I think that I think they took a gamble, and I think it's very likely that this session they're going to lose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and maybe we're wrong. Maybe this continues to play out because, like I said, the last few years they can argue this strategy has been working.
Right.
Now ask the rank and file teacher across the state. Do you feel like you're winning? Are you tired of winning yet?
Right.
I don't know. I think there's a lot that is unaddressed when it comes to working conditions, when it comes to budget equity, when it comes to equity as a concept in terms of not just the staff but the students. There's a lot that's unaddressed in public education in Alabama. So there again, it's kind of in a weird bind. Like it wants to brag about its success, but that also sort of contradicts with the lived experiences of so many educators across the state who are really working extremely hard in extremely difficult circumstances and are not properly resourced, trained, supported, or compensated.
Yeah. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.